The cold hit Zachary Kern's face like a fist of iron when he stepped out to check the sheep one last time. And he knew before the first flake touched his collar that this would be the kind of storm that killed the unprepared. He moved through the flock with practiced efficiency, counting heads in the failing light, his shepherd's crook tapping gently against woolly flanks to guide the stragglers toward the stone fold he had built into the hillside 3 summers ago. 37 ewes, all accounted for, all pressing together for warmth as the wind began to scream down from the high peaks. He latched the fold gate with fingers already growing numb, turned his back to the gale, and made his way to the hut that would be his world until the storm broke. The hut was small, perhaps 12 feet square, built of fieldstone and timber with a turf roof thick enough to hold back winter. A single window shuttered tight, a door that hung true on its leather hinges, a hearth that drew clean, and a sleeping platform built above the floor to escape the worst of the cold. Zachary had spent 5 winters in this high pasture, watching over flocks that belonged to the valley families who paid him in wool, coin, and provisions. He was 24 years old and had spoken fewer words in his life than most men spoke in a season. His father had been the same, a shepherd before him, a man who understood that silence was not emptiness but a kind of fullness, a way of listening to the world without cluttering it with needless sound. He built up the fire with the last of the dry wood he had carried inside that morning, set his iron kettle to boil for tea, and cut 3 thick slices from the loaf of dark bread that would be his supper. The wind screamed louder now, shaking the shutters, and snow began to hiss against the walls like thrown sand. He ate slowly, washing down the bread with hot tea, then wrapped himself in his sheepskin cloak and sat by the fire to wait out the night. The storm would blow itself out by morning, or it would not. Either way, there was nothing to do but wait. The pounding on the door came near midnight, violent and desperate, barely audible over the howl of the blizzard. Zachary rose without hesitation, lifted the bar, and pulled the door inward against the pressure of the wind. Snow exploded into the room in a white rush, and with it came a figure that stumbled forward and nearly fell into his arms. He caught her by the shoulders, steadied her, then leaned his weight against the door and forced it shut. The bar dropped back into place, and the roar of the storm became muffled again, distant. She stood in the center of his hut, breathing hard, and he saw her clearly for the first time in the firelight. An orc woman, tall but not towering, perhaps 5.5 feet, with green skin that looked almost gray in the dim light and dark hair plastered wet against her skull. Her ears were pointed, her small tusks visible when she opened her mouth to gasp for air, and her eyes were golden brown, wide with cold and shock. She wore a traveling cloak that was crusted with ice, and clutched against her chest was a leather case shaped to hold a stringed instrument. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Zachary moved past her without speaking, took his own dry cloak from its peg, and draped it over her shoulders. Then he guided her to the fire with a hand on her elbow and pushed her gently down to sit on the stone hearth. She let him, too cold to resist, too exhausted to question. He filled his tin cup with the last of the hot tea and pressed it into her hands, folding her fingers around it when she seemed unable to grip it herself. Then he turned to the door, checked the bar again, and began to stuff rags into the gap where snow had blown in. "Thank you," she said, her voice raw. "I thought I was going to die out there." He glanced at her, nodded once, and went back to sealing the door. "I am Zara," she said. "Zara Kael. I am a musician. I was traveling over the pass when the storm caught me. I saw your light and I thought, I hoped." He pulled the last rag tight and straightened, brushing snow from his hands. Then he crossed to the far corner of the hut where his provisions were stored. took down a second loaf of bread and a wheel of hard cheese, and brought them to the hearth. He cut generous portions of both and handed them to her, then refilled the kettle from a clay jug of water and set it back over the fire. "Eat," he said. It was the first word he had spoken since she arrived. Zara ate like someone who had not seen food in a day, tearing into the bread with strong white teeth, washing it down with gulps of tea that must have burned her throat. He let her eat in peace, occupying himself with checking the fire, adding another log, adjusting the flue. When she finally slowed and sat back, some color had returned to her face and the shaking had eased. "What is your name?" she asked. "Zachary Kern. You are a shepherd," he nodded. "How long will the storm last?" He looked toward the shuttered window, listening to the wind. 2 days. Maybe 3. Her eyes widened. 3 days. Maybe. I cannot. I have to be in Cross Hill by the new moon. The troop is expecting me. He said nothing, only poured himself a fresh cup of tea and sat down on the floor across the hearth from her. The silence stretched out, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the moan of the wind. Zara looked around the small hut, taking in the neatness of it, the careful arrangement of tools and provisions, the sleeping platform with its single wool blanket. "I am sorry to intrude," she said quietly. "But I am grateful. You saved my life." He met her eyes for a moment, then looked back at the fire. "You would do the same. I do not know if I would have the courage to open the door in a storm like this." "It is not courage, it is what you do." She studied him in the firelight, this quiet man who spoke in short sentences, and moved with the economy of someone who had no energy to waste. His face was weathered, browned by sun and wind, and his dark hair was cropped short. His eyes were gray, calm, and gave away nothing. He wore the rough wool clothing of a shepherd, patched but clean, and his hands were scarred and strong. There was something restful about him, she thought, something like the stillness of deep water. "You live here alone?" she asked. "In winter, yes. Is it not lonely?" He considered the question, turning it over in his mind before answering. "No, you do not miss conversation. Company, I have the sheep." Despite herself, Zara smiled. "Do they talk back, sometimes?" It was a joke, delivered so deadpan that it took her a moment to realize it, and when she did, she laughed, a bright sound that filled the small space and seemed to surprise them both. He did not smile, but something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. "I talk too much," Zara said. "My mother always said so. She said I was born with a song in my mouth and have been singing ever since. You are a musician." "Yes, I play the fiddle." She touched the case that lay beside her on the hearth. "I travel with a troupe, or I did. We play at fairs, harvest festivals, weddings. Anywhere people will pay to hear music. You like it." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "I love the music, I love playing, but the traveling." She trailed off, looking into her cup. "It is hard to never have a home." He said nothing, but he was listening. She could tell by the way he held himself, the way his attention was focused on her, even though he was not looking at her directly. "The troop master holds my fiddle's papers," she said, the words coming out in a rush as if she had been holding them back for a long time. "And my earnings. He says it is bond, to keep me from running off before I have paid back what he spent to train me, but the debt never seems to get smaller. Every time I think I am close, he finds another expense, another fee. I have been with the troop for 5 years, and I am no closer to being free than I was the first day." Zachary looked at her then, his gray eyes steady. "That is not right." "No," she agreed quietly. "It is not. But what can I do? Without the fiddle I cannot make a living, and he has the law on his side, or says he does. The bond was signed and witnessed. Witnessed by who? By him, and by his brother." Zachary's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. He rose, took the empty cup from her hands and refilled it from the kettle. When he handed it back, their fingers brushed, and she felt the calluses on his palm, the warmth of his skin. "You should sleep," he said. "The platform is warmer than the floor. I will keep the fire going." "I cannot take your bed." "I do not need it. I am used to the cold." "Then we will share it," Zara said, and when he started to shake his head, she added, "Please, I do not want to be the reason you freeze, and I do not want to be alone." He looked at her for a long moment, weighing her words, then nodded once. "All right." The platform was barely wide enough for two, and the single blanket was meant for one, but they made it work. Zara lay on her back, stiff and awkward at first, hyper-aware of the warmth of his body beside her, the rise and fall of his breathing. He lay on his side, facing away from her, giving her as much space as the narrow bed allowed. The fire crackled below, sending dancing shadows across the ceiling, and outside the storm raged on. "Zachary," she said into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for everything." "Sleep," he said, not unkindly. "Tomorrow will be long." She closed her eyes and, despite everything, felt safe. The first day of the storm passed in a slow rhythm of small tasks and long silences. Zachary rose before dawn to check the fire and the door, to melt snow for water, to ration out their food. Zara helped where she could, learning the routines of the hut, the way he did everything with purpose and efficiency. They ate a small breakfast of porridge made from oats and dried apples, and afterward she asked if she could play her fiddle. He nodded, and she opened the case with careful hands. The instrument inside was beautiful, made of golden wood that glowed in the firelight, and when she lifted it to her shoulder and drew the bow across the strings, the sound that filled the hut was pure and sweet. She played a simple melody, a folk tune she had learned as a child, and Zachary sat by the fire and listened without moving. When she finished, the last note hung in the air for a moment before fading into silence. "That was beautiful," he said. "Thank you. It is an old song. My grandmother taught it to me. Play another." So she did. She played through the morning and into the afternoon, songs both lively and sad, tunes for dancing and tunes for mourning, and he listened to everyone. The music seemed to fill the spaces between them, building a bridge where words might have failed. She found herself playing things she had not played in years, songs she had half forgotten, and it felt like uncovering pieces of herself she had buried. Between songs they talked, or rather she talked and he listened, and slowly, carefully, he began to offer his own words in return. She learned that he had been born in the valley below, the youngest of 3 brothers, and that his father and grandfather had been shepherds before him. She learned that he had never wanted to be anything else, that the high pastures felt more like home to him than any house or town. She learned that he had a sister who had married a miller and lived in Cross Hill, and that he saw her perhaps once a year when he brought the flock down for shearing. "Do you miss her?" Zara asked. "Yes," he said simply, "but she is happy, that is what matters." "Do you ever want to marry, have a family?" He was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. "I did not think anyone would want this life," he said at last. "The loneliness of it, the cold." "It is not lonely now," Zara said softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them that neither of them named. The second day of the storm was harder. The wind howled without ceasing, and snow piled so high against the door that Zachary had to dig them out just to check on the sheep in the fold. He came back coated in white, his face raw from the cold, and Zara pulled him close to the fire and rubbed warmth back into his hands. Her touch was gentle and sure, and he let her, watching her face as she worked. Her tusks were small and smooth, curving up just slightly from her lower jaw, and there was a small scar above her left eyebrow that he had not noticed before. "How did you get that?" he asked, nodding toward the scar. She touched it self-consciously. A fight when I was younger. Some boys in a village threw rocks at me, called me a monster. One of the rocks hit me before I could get away. His expression darkened. They should have been punished. They were children, old enough to know cruelty. She smiled sadly. You are fierce for a man of few words. I do not like injustice. Neither do I. But I have learned to live with it. What else can I do? He did not answer, but the set of his jaw told her he was thinking about it, turning it over in his mind like a stone. That afternoon she coaxed him into talking about the sheep, and he surprised her by speaking at length about the different breeds, the signs of illness, the way a flock moved and thought as one. His voice was low and steady, and she found herself lulled by it, by the way he chose his words with care. When he finished, she clapped her hands together. You are a poet, Zachary Kern. You just do not know it. He looked startled. I am not. You are. You see the world in a way most people do not. You notice things, details. That is just being a shepherd. It is more than that. It is a gift. He shook his head, embarrassed, and she laughed and took up her fiddle again. This time she played a lively reel, something to break the tension, and before she knew it he was tapping his foot in time with the music. She grinned at him and played faster, pushing the tempo until her fingers were flying, and he actually smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. When she finally stopped, breathless and laughing, he said, You are very good. I should be. I have been playing since I was 6 years old. How did you learn? My father taught me. He was a musician too. He died when I was 12 and I had to find my own way. That is how I ended up with the troupe. I thought they would be like a family, but they are not. What are they like? She sighed. They are transactional. Everything is about the money, the next performance, the next town. There is no loyalty, no care. Just the bond and the contract and the troupe master always reminding us what we owe. You deserve better, Zachary said quietly. Zara looked at him, at the sincerity in his gray eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. So do you, she said. I have what I need. Do you? He did not answer, but the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was full, charged with things neither of them knew how to say. That night they lay on the narrow platform again, and this time when Zara shivered, Zachary moved closer without a word and put his arm around her. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed against him, letting his warmth seep into her bones. His heart beat steady and slow beneath her ear, and the storm outside seemed very far away. Zachary, she whispered. Yes, I am glad the storm caught me here, with you. His arm tightened around her just slightly. I am glad too. She tilted her head up to look at him, and in the dim glow of the fire she saw the same longing in his face that she felt in her own chest. Slowly, carefully, she reached up and touched his cheek, and he closed his eyes and leaned into her hand. I have never met anyone like you, she said, nor I you. I do not want to leave when the storm ends. Then stay. It was that simple, that impossible. She felt tears prick her eyes and blink them away. I cannot, the bond, the troupe master, he will come looking for me. Let him. You do not understand, he has the law, he can force me back. Not if the bond is unlawful. She pulled back to look at him properly. What do you mean? You said he witnessed the bond himself. That his brother was the other witness. That is not legal. A bond must be witnessed by a reeve or a cleric, someone impartial. If it was not, the bond is void. Hope flared in her chest, bright and painful. Are you certain? My sister's husband had a bond dispute with a merchant. The miller won because the bond was not properly witnessed. The reeve in Cross Hill is fair. He will hear your case. But the fiddle, the troupe master still has it. Then we will get it back. How? I have savings. The flock is worth something. I can buy it from him. I cannot let you do that. You can, he said firmly, and you will. Because this is not just about the fiddle, Zara, it is about your freedom and I. He paused, struggling for the words, then said them anyway. I want you to be free. Even if that means you do not stay, I want you to have the choice. She kissed him then, a soft press of lips that tasted of salt and tea and the promise of something new. He kissed her back, tentative at first, then with more certainty, his hand cupping the back of her head. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I choose you, Zara said fiercely. I choose this. I choose us. By dawn, he said, when the storm breaks, we will go down together. We will face the troop master. We will make this right. By dawn, she agreed, and kissed him again. But dawn was still a day away, and the third day of the storm was the longest of all. They woke tangled together. The fire burned down to embers, and Zachary rose to build it up again while Zara stretched and yawned. The wind had gentled slightly, though snow still fell thick and fast outside. They ate a sparse breakfast, rationing what was left of the bread and cheese, and Zachary went out again to check the sheep. This time Zara went with him, bundled in both their cloaks, and together they dug a path to the fold and scattered the last of the hay for the flock. The ewes were restless, pressing close, and Zachary moved among them with steady hands, checking each one for signs of distress. Zara watched him work, saw the gentleness in the way he handled the animals, the patience. When he was satisfied that they were well enough, he took her hand and they fought their way back to the hut through the blowing snow. Inside, they stripped off their wet cloaks and huddled by the fire, shivering. Zara made tea while Zachary changed into dry clothes, and when he sat down beside her again, she leaned against him without thinking. It felt natural now, easy, as if they had been doing this for years instead of days. "Tell me about your life," she said. "I want to know everything." So he did. He told her about the rhythms of the shepherd's year, the lambing in spring and the shearing in summer, the long watches in autumn and the quiet of winter. He told her about the mountains, the high meadows thick with wildflowers, the eagles that nested in the crags, the wolves that circled the flock on moonless nights. He told her about the satisfaction of a job well done, a flock brought safely through another season, and the simple pleasure of bread and cheese eaten under an open sky. "It sounds beautiful," Zara said. "It is, but it is also hard. Lonely, like you said. I have always thought that was just part of the trade, but now—" He paused, searching for the words. "Now I think maybe I was just waiting, for someone who could see the beauty in it too." "I do see it," she said. "I see it because you showed me." They spent the rest of the day talking, playing music, and simply being together. Zara played every song she knew, and Zachary listened with an attention that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. Between songs, they kissed, slow and sweet, exploring this new thing between them with careful hands. There was no urgency, no rush. Just the two of them and the storm outside and the warmth of the fire. As evening fell, Zachary made a stew from the last of their provisions, a thin broth with onions and dried meat, and they ate it slowly, savoring every bite. Afterward, Zara took his hands in hers and looked into his eyes. "I need to tell you something," she said. "All right." In Orcish culture, when someone chooses a mate, it is a bond that cannot be broken. It is more than marriage, more than a promise. It is a recognition of the other person as the one who completes you. My people do not take it lightly. I understand. Do you? Because I am going to say it, Zachary, and once I do, there is no taking it back, not for me. He squeezed her hands gently. Then say it. She took a deep breath, her golden brown eyes locked on his. "By the old ways of my people, by the choice of my heart, I call you my mate, now and always. You are mine, and I am yours if you will have me." For a long moment he was silent. Then he lifted her hands to his lips and kissed them, one after the other, and said in a voice rough with emotion, "I will have you, now and always. You are my mate, Zara Kael, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you did not choose wrong." She laughed through tears and threw her arms around his neck, and he held her close, his face buried in her hair. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the knowledge that something irrevocable had been decided. When they finally pulled apart, Zara wiped her eyes and smiled. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we wait for dawn," he said, "and then we go and claim your freedom." True to Zachary's prediction, the storm broke before sunrise on the fourth day. They woke to silence, the eerie stillness that comes after a blizzard, and when Zachary opened the shutter, pale light flooded the hut. The world outside was buried in white, but the sky was clear and the wind had died. He turned to Zara and nodded. "Today." They packed quickly, taking only what they needed. Zachary strapped on his shepherd's pack and slung his crook over his shoulder, and Zara held her fiddle case close to her chest like a shield. Before they left, Zachary checked the sheep one last time, counting heads, making sure they had enough hay to last until he could return. Then he barred the fold gate and turned his back on the high pasture. The journey down from the mountains was brutal. The snow was waist-deep in places, and they had to break trail through drifts that seemed endless. Zachary went first, using his crook to test the depth, and Zara followed in his footsteps. It took them the entire day to reach the tree line, and by the time they stumbled into the first farmstead on the valley floor, the sun was setting and they were both exhausted. The farmer, a grizzled man named Torvin, took them in without question and fed them a hot meal. When he heard their story, he nodded grimly. "The troop master is a snake," Torvin said. "Everyone knows it, but no one will stand against him. He has too much influence, too many friends in the merchant guild." "The Reeve will hear us," Zachary said. "Reeve Halden is a fair man. But you will need proof, the bond if you have it, and witnesses who can testify to the terms." "I have the bond," Zara said. "He gave me a copy. I keep it with my fiddle." She opened the case and pulled out a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age and handling. Zachary took it and read it by the firelight, his jaw tightening as he scanned the words. At the bottom were two signatures, the troop master's and another that looked similar, probably the brothers'. There was no seal, no mark of a reeve or cleric. "This is worthless," Zachary said. "The bond is invalid, but we still need to get the fiddle from him." "I know where the troop is camped," Torvin said. "They are set up outside Cross Hill for the winter fair. If you are going to confront the troop master, do it in public. Make sure there are witnesses." "We will," Zachary said. He looked at Zara. "Are you ready?" She squared her shoulders and nodded. "I am." They reached Cross Hill the next afternoon, their legs aching and their faces raw from the cold. The town was bustling with activity, the winter fair in full swing despite the recent storm. Stalls lined the main square, selling everything from wool to ale to roasted nuts, and a crowd had gathered around a stage where a troupe of performers was putting on a show. Zara recognized them immediately, her former companions, dressed in their bright costumes, dancing and singing for the crowd. And there, standing to one side of the stage, watching with a calculating eye, was the troop master. His name was Grimmel Thorn, and he was a weasel of a man, thin and sharp-faced, with oily hair and quick, nervous hands. He wore fine clothes, too fine for a traveling showman, and when he saw Zara approaching through the crowd, his expression shifted from surprise to anger. "Well, well," Grimmel said loudly, his voice cutting through the noise. "Look who decided to come back, the little runaway. Where have you been, girl? You have missed 3 performances. Do you have any idea how much money you have cost me?" Zara stopped a few paces away, Zachary at her side, and met Grimmel's gaze without flinching. I was caught in the storm. I nearly died. A convenient excuse. And who is this? Your new protector. Grimmel's eyes raked over Zachary with contempt. A shepherd. How touching. Did you think you could run off and play house and I would just forget about the bond? You owe me 5 more years, girl. 5 years or 500 silver. That was the agreement. The agreement is void, Zachary said, his voice calm but hard. The bond was not properly witnessed. Grimmel's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Zachary pulled out the parchment and held it up. This bond was witnessed only by you and your brother. That is not legal. A bond must be witnessed by a reeve or a cleric. This is worth nothing. A murmur went through the crowd that had started to gather, and Grimmel's face flushed red. That is a lie. The bond is legal. I have enforced dozens like it. Then you have been breaking the law for years, Zachary said. And it ends now. You think you can come into my town and make accusations? Grimmel snarled. He turned to the crowd. This man is trying to steal my bonded servant. She owes me money. She signed a contract. A contract that is not worth the paper it is written on, said a new voice, and the crowd parted to let through a tall man in the robes of a reeve. He was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair and a stern but fair expression. I heard the commotion from my office. What is going on here? Reeve Halden, Grimmel said, his tone shifting to something more wheedling. Thank the gods you are here. This shepherd is trying to interfere with my legal bond. I have the papers right here. Let me see them, Halden said, and Grimmel handed over a copy of the bond with a triumphant smirk. The reeve read it carefully, then looked up at Grimmel with cold eyes. This bond is invalid. It was not witnessed by an impartial party. You know the law, Grimmel. That is a technicality. The intent is clear. The law is the law. The bond is void. The girl owes you nothing. Grimmel's face went from red to purple. She has my fiddle. She has to return it. The fiddle belongs to me, Zara said, her voice shaking but strong. I brought it with me when I joined the troop. You took it and claimed it as part of the bond, but it was always mine. Prove it, Grimmel spat. I can, Zara said. She opened the case and lifted out the fiddle, turning it so that the light caught the wood. Look at the scroll at the top of the neck. There is a carving there. My father made it. His initials and mine, K and K intertwined, Kael. Halden leaned in and examined the carving, then nodded. I see it. This instrument belonged to her family. You have no claim to it, Grimmel. This is outrageous. She has been with my troop for 5 years. I trained her, I fed her, I gave her a place. I deserve compensation. You deserve nothing, Zachary said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Grimmel take a step back. You have been exploiting her and others like her, using false bonds to trap them. That ends today. If you have a complaint, take it to the magistrate. But you will not threaten her again, not while I am here. Grimmel looked around at the crowd, saw the hostile faces, the way people were murmuring to each other, and realized he had lost. He pointed a shaking finger at Zara. You will regret this. I will make sure of it. No, you will not, Halden said sharply. If I hear that you have so much as spoken to this woman again, I will have you brought up on charges of fraud and coercion. Do you understand me? Grimmel glared at him, then turned and stalked away through the crowd, his shoulders hunched. The gathered townsfolk began to disperse, talking animatedly, and Halden turned to Zara and Zachary with a faint smile. Well done, he said. Both of you. It takes courage to stand up to a man like Grimmel. Many have tried and failed. Thank you, Zara said, her voice thick with relief. Thank you for standing with us. It is my job to uphold the law. You did the hard part. He looked at Zachary. You are the shepherd from the high pasture, are you not? Zachary Kern. Yes, Reeve. Your sister speaks well of you. She will be pleased to hear you are down from the mountains. You should visit her before you go back." "I will, thank you." Halden nodded and walked away, leaving them standing in the middle of the square. Zara turned to Zachary, her eyes bright with unshed tears, and then she was in his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it. I am free." "You are free," he agreed, holding her tight. "And you are mine." "And you are mine," she said, pulling back to look at him. "My mate, my choice. Forever." He kissed her there in the middle of the square, in front of everyone, and let the world see that he was hers just as much as she was his. They spent that night at an inn in Cross Hill, in a real bed for the first time in days, and the next morning they went to visit Zachary's sister. Her name was Alara, and she was a round, cheerful woman with her brother's gray eyes and a warmth that filled the miller's house. She welcomed Zara without hesitation, exclaiming over the fiddle, insisting they stay for lunch, and by the end of the meal, Zara felt like part of the family. "I am so glad he found you," Alara said as they cleared the table together. "I have been worried about him for years, up there all alone. I kept telling him he needed to find someone, but he would just shake his head and say no one would want that life." "I want it," Zara said. "I want him and the life he has. I want to build something together." Alara hugged her, fierce and sudden. "Then you are my sister now. Welcome to the family." Before they left, Alara pressed a small purse of coins into Zachary's hand. "For the wedding," she said, "or for whatever you need. You are always taking care of everyone else. Let me take care of you for once." Zachary tried to refuse, but Alara would not hear of it, and eventually he pocketed the purse with a nod of thanks. Then he and Zara set out for the high pasture, walking side by side through the snow-covered valley. The journey took 2 days, and they spent the nights huddled together in shepherds' shelters along the trail, talking and laughing and planning their future. "I will need to go back to the troops camp and collect my things," Zara said. "My clothes, my books, a few keepsakes. But after that I am done with that life." "We will go together," Zachary said. "I will not let you face them alone." "I know you will not. That is one of the reasons I love you." He stopped walking and turned to her, his expression serious. "Say that again." "What? That you love me?" She smiled and took his hands. "I love you, Zachary Kern. I love your quiet strength, your kindness, your patience. I love the way you see the world. I love the life you have built, and I want to be part of it. I love you." He pulled her close and rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too. I did not know I could feel this way about anyone, but you changed everything. You are everything." They stood there in the snow, holding each other, and the world around them seemed to hold its breath. When they reached the hut, it was exactly as they had left it, and Zachary set about restocking the firewood and provisions while Zara unpacked her fiddle and played a song of homecoming. The sheep in the fold heard the music and called out, and Zachary went to tend them, checking each one, making sure they had weathered the storm. All 37 were accounted for, healthy and whole, and he allowed himself a moment of relief. That night, lying on the narrow platform with Zara curled against his side, he said, "We will need to build a bigger bed," she laughed. "Yes, we will, and maybe add a room to the hut, for when the children come." "Children," he repeated, testing the word. "You want children one day, not now." "But one day, do you?" "Yes," he said, surprising himself with the certainty of it. "Yes, I do. Then we will have them, a whole flock of our own." He smiled in the darkness and kissed the top of her head. "A flock, I like that." The winter passed slowly, measured in snowstorms and clear, bright days when the sun turned the mountains to silver. Zara settled into the rhythm of the shepherd's life, learning to read the weather, to spot signs of illness in the flock, to spin wool into thread. She played her fiddle every evening, filling the small hut with music, and Zachary found himself speaking more, sharing stories and thoughts he had kept locked inside for years. In late winter, they made the journey down to Cross Hill again, this time to stand before a cleric and exchange vows. It was a small ceremony, just Zara and her husband and a handful of friends, but it was perfect. Zara wore a simple dress of green wool that Zara had helped her sew, and Zachary wore his best shirt, patched but clean. When the cleric pronounced them husband and wife, Zara felt a surge of joy so fierce it took her breath away. They returned to the high pasture as the first signs of spring began to show. The snow retreated from the lower slopes, and the ewes grew heavy with lambs. Zachary worked from dawn to dusk, helping with the difficult births, keeping watch for predators, and Zara was always at his side. She learned to love the work, the satisfaction of bringing new life into the world, the simple beauty of a lamb taking its first wobbly steps. One evening in early spring, as they sat by the fire after a long day, Zara set down her fiddle and looked at Zachary. "I have been thinking," she said. "About what?" "About music. I do not want to give it up, but I also do not want to travel anymore. I want to stay here with you. So stay. And play. But who will hear me?" He considered this. "In summer, when the shepherds bring their flocks to the high meadows, we could host a gathering, a festival of sorts, music and food and dancing. You could play. Others could too. It would be a way to share your gift without leaving." Her face lit up. "That is a wonderful idea. We could make it an annual thing, a celebration of the high pastures." "We could," he agreed. "If you want to, I want to. I want to build this life with you, Zachary, all of it. The sheep, the music, the festivals, the children when they come. I want all of it." He reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then we will have it, together." The first festival was small, just a dozen shepherds and their families, but it was a joyful affair. Zara played her fiddle, and others joined in with flutes and drums, and they danced under the stars until the fire burned low. People talked about it for months afterward, and the next year, twice as many came. By the third year, the High Pasture Festival had become a tradition, a bright spot in the hard life of the mountain shepherds. Zara and Zachary's hut grew too, a new room added each year as their family expanded. In the spring, after their second anniversary, Zara gave birth to a daughter with green skin and her father's gray eyes. They named her Lyra, and she was the light of their lives. 2 years later came another daughter, Ree, who had her mother's golden brown eyes and a laugh that could be heard across the meadow. And 2 years after that, a third daughter, Helena, who was born in the middle of a snowstorm and came into the world with a cry so loud it startled the sheep. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, patient and gentle, teaching the girls to read the mountains the way he did, to respect the flock, to find beauty in the simple rhythms of the seasons. Zara taught them music, and by the time Lyra was 5, she could play simple tunes on a small fiddle Zachary had commissioned from a craftsman in Cross Hill. The years rolled by in a pattern of work and joy, hardship and celebration. There were difficult winters and good harvests, lambs lost to wolves and lambs that thrived. Through it all, Zara and Zachary stood together, their bond as strong as the day she had called him her mate in the middle of a blizzard. One evening in late summer, when Lyra was 10 and Ree was 8 and Helena was 6, the family sat together outside the hut, watching the sun set over the mountains. The girls were playing a game with pebbles, their laughter ringing out, and Zara leaned against Zachary's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "When I knocked on your door in the storm?" "Every day," he said. "Do you ever wish things had been different, that you had not opened the door?" He turned to look at her, his gray eyes steady. "Never, not once." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara. You and the girls. You are my life." She kissed him, soft and sweet, and then Helena came running over, demanding to be picked up, and Zachary scooped her into his arms with a laugh. Lyra and Ree followed, and soon they were all piled together in a tangle of limbs and giggles, and Zara thought that this, right here, was everything she had ever wanted. That night, after the girls were asleep, Zara took out her fiddle and played a new song, one she had been working on for weeks. It was a melody that captured the story of a woman lost in a storm, and a man who opened his door, of two people who found each other in the most unlikely of places and built a life together against all odds. When she finished, Zachary had tears in his eyes. "That was beautiful," he said. "It is our story," she said. "I wanted to write it down, so the girls will know, so everyone will know." "What will you call it?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "The Shepherd and the Storm," he nodded. "Perfect." The following spring brought a surprise. A fourth daughter, born just as the first flowers began to bloom in the high meadows. They named her Rosalind, and she had her mother's pointed ears and her father's quiet intensity. With 4 daughters, the hut was bursting at the seams, and Zachary spent the summer building an addition, a proper second floor with room for the girls to grow. Zara's music had spread beyond the high pastures by then, carried by travelers who had attended the annual festival. She received invitations to play at gatherings in the valley, and occasionally she accepted, taking the girls with her and making a family adventure of it. But she always returned to the mountains, to the hut and the sheep and the life she had built with Zachary. One winter, when the snow came early and the passes were closed, a young orc woman arrived at their door, seeking shelter just as Zara had all those years ago. Her name was Mira, and she was running from a cruel employer who had tried to force her into an unlawful bond. Zara took her in without hesitation, and over the long winter months, she and Zachary helped Mira find her courage and plan her escape. When spring came, they went down to Cross Hill together, just as Zara and Zachary had done, and stood before Reeve Halden, now older but still fair, and he voided Mira's bond just as he had voided Zara's. Mira wept with gratitude and stayed in the valley, eventually finding work with a weaver who treated her kindly. She visited the high pastures every summer for the festival, and she always brought gifts for the girls. The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to the life Zara and Zachary had built. The girls grew tall and strong, Lyra with her love of music, Ree with her quick mind and curiosity, Helena with her fearless spirit, and Rosalind with her gentle heart. They were a family bound not just by blood but by love and respect, and the shared work of tending the flock and the land. When Lyra turned 16, she announced that she wanted to be a musician like her mother, and Zara gave her the golden fiddle that her father had made so many years ago. Lyra took it with reverence and promised to honor the legacy. Ree, meanwhile, discovered a talent for numbers and went to live with Aunt Alara in Cross Hill, apprenticing to a merchant. Helena decided she wanted to be a shepherd like her father, and Zachary began to teach her everything he knew, patient and thorough. And Rosalind, the youngest, declared that she wanted to be a healer, and they sent her to study with the village herbalist. Through it all, Zara and Zachary remained the steady center, their love as deep and abiding as the mountains themselves. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative, had faced down injustice and prejudice, had built something beautiful and lasting out of nothing but determination and faith in each other. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of their now much larger home, watching Helena guide the flock back to the fold with the same sure hands her father had once used, Zara said, "We did well, did we not?" Zachary looked at her, at the lines around her eyes and the silver beginning to thread through her dark hair, and he thought she had never been more beautiful. "We did," he agreed. "We did very well. I would do it all again," she said. "Every moment, every choice, all of it." "So would I," he said, and took her hand. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the sound of Helena's voice drifted up to them, calling to the sheep in the same low, steady tone her father had taught her. Somewhere inside the house, Lyra was playing the golden fiddle, and the music spilled out into the evening air, sweet and clear. Zara leaned her head on Zachary's shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on her face and the solid presence of her husband beside her. She thought back to that night so many years ago, when she had stumbled through a blizzard and knocked on the door of a stranger, desperate and afraid. She thought about the quiet man who had opened that door without hesitation, who had shared his fire and his food and, eventually, his life. She thought about the moment, as dawn broke on the fourth day, when she had looked at him in the pale morning light, and known with absolute certainty that he was hers and she was his. She had called him her mate, had spoken the words that bound them together in a way that went deeper than any human law or custom. And he had accepted, had taken her hand and her heart and had never let go. They had built this life together, stone by stone, season by season. They had raised 4 daughters in love and safety, had created a home in the high places where few others dared to dwell. They had faced down those who would have kept Zara in chains, had stood together against prejudice and scorn, and had proven that love could bridge any divide. And now, in the golden twilight of a summer evening, with the music of her daughter filling the air and the man she loved beside her, Zara knew that every moment of struggle, every hardship, every sacrifice had been worth it. This was the life she had chosen, and it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Zachary asked. "For opening the door, for letting me in, for choosing me back." He turned to her, his gray eyes warm, and kissed her forehead. "There was never a choice," he said. "From the moment I saw you, you were already mine. I just had to wait for you to know it too." She smiled and kissed him, a long, slow kiss that held all the love and gratitude and joy of a life well lived. When they finally pulled apart, the last of the sunlight was fading from the sky, and the first stars were beginning to appear. Helena finished settling the flock and came up to the porch, her face flushed and happy. "All accounted for," she announced, in unconscious echo of her father's nightly report. "Well done," Zachary said, and she beamed. Lyra's music swelled inside the house, and Rosalind's voice joined in, singing a folk song their mother had taught them. Zara felt her heart swell with pride and love, and she looked at Zachary and saw the same emotion reflected in his face. "Come," she said, standing and pulling him to his feet. "Let us go inside. Our family is waiting." They walked into the house together, hand in hand, and the door closed behind them, shutting out the growing dark and holding in the light and warmth and music. Outside, the mountains stood watch, ancient and eternal, and the stars wheeled slowly across the sky. And in the high pastures, where the wind sang through the grass and the sheep slept safe in their fold, the story of a woman and a man who had found each other in a blizzard lived on, passed down from generation to generation, a testament to the power of love and the strength of 2 people who had chosen each other against all odds. The end came not with drama but with quiet satisfaction, the way all good stories should. Zara and Zachary grew old together, their hands still clasped, their hearts still beating as one. They watched their daughters marry and have children of their own, saw their grandchildren run through the same meadows where they had once walked, heard the echo of their own laughter in the voices of the next generation. When the time came, many years later, to pass the flock to Helena, Zachary did so with pride and confidence. She had learned well, had grown into a shepherd as skilled and devoted as her father. And when Lyra gave a concert in Cross Hill, playing the golden fiddle for an audience of hundreds, Zara sat in the front row and wept with joy, knowing that the music her father had given her would live on through her children and her children's children. They never left the high pastures, never wanted to. This was their home, the place where they had found each other and built their life. On warm summer nights, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set, and Zara would take out her fiddle and play, and Zachary would listen with the same rapt attention he had given her that first night in the storm. Their love story became legend in the valley, told and retold until it took on a life of its own. Some versions were embellished, adding details that had never happened, but the core remained true. A human man and an orc woman who had defied expectations, broken unlawful bonds, and created something beautiful out of nothing but love and determination. And every year at the High Pasture Festival, someone would stand and tell the story again, and the listeners would lean in close, captivated by the tale of the shepherd and the storm, of a door opened in a blizzard and a life changed forever. Because that was the truth at the heart of it all, that sometimes in the darkest moments when the storm rages and hope seems lost, a door opens. And sometimes, if you are brave enough to step through, you find exactly what you were looking for, even if you did not know you were looking at all. Zara and Zachary had found each other in the storm, had chosen each other by dawn, and had spent the rest of their lives proving that love, real love, was worth any struggle, any sacrifice, any cost. And in the end, as they sat together on the porch of their home, surrounded by the family they had built and the life they had created, they knew beyond any doubt that they had been right. They had chosen well. They had chosen each other. And that choice, made in the cold darkness of a winter storm so many years ago, had made all the difference.